Who are you? My name is Wyatt Price, and I am a former member of the American People's National Party, which was a revolutionary American organization. Our aim was to abolish the globalist system and all its horrors by replacing it with nationalism, a system based on the principle laid out by Lincoln: government of the people, by the people, for the people. What is nationalism? Many people, especially in light of recent events, are throwing the word nationalism around without any regard to what it really means. First of all, a party is not nationalist simply because it calls itself thus. Nationalism is also not simply patriotism, because nationalism is defined as being which group controls state power. Nationalism is not fascism, which is an imperialist ideology. For nationalism is only for those who value self-determinism above all else that existence offers. Nationalism is, in short, characterized by the promotion of the interests of a particular nation, especially with the aim of gaining and maintaining the nation's self-governance over its homeland. Nationalism holds that each nation should govern itself, free from outside interference, that a nation is a natural and ideal basis for a polity, and that the nation is the only rightful source of political power. It further aims to build and maintain a single national identity based on shared characteristics such as culture, language, bloodline, politics, and belief in a shared singular history, and to promote national unity or solidarity. Nationalism, therefore, seeks to preserve and maintain a nation's traditional culture, and cultural revivals have been associated with nationalist movements. But isn't nationalism tyrannical? What is tyranny, if not blindly submitting ourselves to anti-American imperialism, the New World Order, and European hegemony? What is tyranny, if not silencing the voice of the Americans and their nation to profit the global agenda? What is tyranny, if not imposing a libercidal dogma of political correctness upon the American people, when the sole purpose of this dogma is to promote anti-Americanism and demonize patriotism? What is tyranny, if not establishing a double-standard globalization on our citizens and our companies? Globalization regulated by notorious anti-American organizations sold to the Europeans and the Asians, such as the WTO. What is tyranny, if not infringing on our natural rights in the name of supranational treaties that the American people do not want? What is tyranny, if not rewriting history to diminish the supremacy of the United States of America, erase our cultural heritage, and impose on us a mourning for fictional crimes purely invented by the globalist Europeans to hide their own war crimes? What is tyranny, if not dictating a single thought doctrine on globalism, immigration, and the so-called progressive causes to the American citizens, and prosecuting any citizen who doesn't agree with the establishment's propaganda of American shame and ethno-masochism? What is tyranny, if not forcibly taxing American citizens to pay for the development of third world countries and the financial expansion of foreign corporations? When the global media orchestration targets our nation to cover the imperialistic aims of the Europeans, when in our own nation workers are fired, shelved, or excluded from any promotion because they adhere to patriotism and reject the globalist subjugation, when the judicial system works on a double standard for the patriots and the aliens, when foreign lobbies are imposed on us and financed by forceful taxation on American citizens and American companies, we are under a tyrannical regime. Isn't nationalism against human nature? Not at all. This ethnocentrism is perfectly natural. Every single civilization that ever existed has applied this principle of national preference. That includes those who are currently conspiring to turn us into rootless citizens of the world. Any political decision must therefore find its inspiration in national values and adhere to not a ready-made model, but a firm and clear guideline to follow. Nationalism doesn't seek to negate the past, as socialism, nor does it intend to stay fixated on an idealized conception of an interior society, as conservatism. But rather than importing apparent and unsustainable social orders from Europe and Asia and adopting them as indubitable models, shouldn't we start by looking at our own civilization, recognized as the greatest in history for guidance and as a political benchmark? And those who repeat the overused argument that nationalism somehow cultivates division and hate are either cosmopolitan propagandists or the biggest useful idiots the New World Order has ever seen. Beyond the fact that it's perfectly natural to have statutory division between Americans and foreigners, it is there the very purpose of nationality and citizenship. Nationalism actually unites all Americans under the national cause. Can globalism really be abolished? Yes. Globalism is in fact nothing more than European imperialism, which imposes forced globalization on others while protecting their own cultures, economies, and civilization behind the same mechanisms they label as fascism when others apply them. Proponents of the global agenda, backed by the politically correct propaganda of mass media and the anti-racist lobbies, which are nothing more than a feeble excuse for institutionalized anti-Americanism, will do all that is possible to prevent Americans from having any tangible influence on the policies applied in the United States. For any American to express any kind of patriotism, and they will automatically be labeled intolerant, racist, fascist, homophobic, bigoted, or any other term used by the globalist propagandists to discredit any opposition to their anti-American doctrine. For the establishment, tolerance is the new veil for anti-Americanism. If you are not willing to follow the global imperialism blindly and sacrifice your freedoms, your rights, and your nation's future for their dictatorial fantasies, you are labeled as intolerant and vilified by the globalist media, who use any opportunity they have to promote American guilt and facilitate the globalist invasion. How can globalism be abolished? George Washington, along with Alexander Hamilton, worked together, like many patriots, to figure out what made imperialism tick. In their day, in fact, ever since the dawn of imperialism, philosophers and ideologues tried to come up with solutions, if not a complete alternative, to the system of imperialism. In fact, this process continued throughout the 20th century, all the way to the present. Nearly all of these ideas not only failed, but they never even got off the ground. For all the legitimate complaints that may be made against it, American nationalism, that is, the methodology worked out by Washington and Hamilton, along with the contributions of Abraham Lincoln, is the only alternative to imperialism that has any meaningful and, yes, positive effects in the world. Even where nationalist revolutions never occurred, just the fear of a nationalist movement forced the ruling country of many nations to make compromises with their respective patriot movements, which would have been unthinkable had it not been for the success of revolution in America. The prestigious position occupied by the United States of America after the American War of Independence also forced many governments to listen to their colonists and grant them concessions which, sadly, since the destruction of nationalism, are in danger of being snatched back. Washington never promised that independence as he saw it could be achieved and accomplished in one stroke. He and other thinkers always understood that independence could suffer reverses and defeats. He and his ideological descendants did figure out some key ground rules, though. What follows is a short summary. It should by no means be considered absolute. First, the American people had to seize political power. Today, this type of state is called the Democratic People's Dictatorship, and it is a fundamental element of American nationalism. Even in the liberal democratic state, which nearly all nationalists saw as being the most progressive form of imperialist government, political power firmly laid in the hands of the ruling continent. American nationalism reveals that the state is always a dictatorship, regardless of its actual form. So America has two parties, but you don't need to dig very deep to see which continent they work for. While the Republicans squirm and wring their hands over their pathetically modest healthcare bill, the bailout of European banks was passed enthusiastically by both parties. Overthrowing this system and establishing the Democratic People's Dictatorship would basically mean that something like healthcare would be deemed a right of the people and instituted immediately. Whereas the control of American healthcare by the World Health Organization would be deemed irrelevant to society, and thus their assets in America would be seized and socialized. How was the American People's National Party different than other patriots, nationalist, or right-wing parties or organizations? First of all, the main difference is that we saw the solution to the problems of the American people in revolution and the seizure of state power by the American people and its political organizations. The methodology by which we strive for revolution is American nationalism. That is, the scientific methodology of socio-economic revolution first devised by George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and contributed to by figures such as Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and the modern philosopher Lana Whelans. This does not mean, however, that we looked at these figures the way religions do at their own prophets, nor did we see their every written word as some kind of holy scripture, or their every action as blameless and divine. That being said, we critiqued their actions from the nationalist methodology of historical dialectical idealism, analyzing actions and events in their historical context, taking into account the benefit of hindsight and trying to avoid idle speculation about what could have been if such and such had or hadn't happened, etc. Because we upheld the general line of these figures, from George Washington to Alexander Hamilton, we considered ourselves anti-liberal, and it is in this way that we differed from most nationalist parties or organizations in the United States. How did you relate to other right-wing organizations? This depended on the organization. We did not get along so well with, for example, idealistic ultra-right organizations which believe the solution to all society's problems lie in establishing a racial empire. These individuals insist that they have a far better society than us nationalists, and perhaps they do. The problem is that the society they wish for is impossible to achieve, and history has proven this. However one judges American nationalism, one can find real, lasting achievements. Nazism has given us nothing, and never will. We can always imagine in our minds an ideal society, but if that ideal society cannot be achieved, then it really isn't an alternative to globalism, and as such is essentially serving the status quo indirectly. This also applies to a certain group of ultra-rightists who love to refight the revolution of 1775 over and over again, insisting that if Jeffersonian democracy had survived, everything would have been different. Every day, new evidence is revealed about how the USA was right to reject Jeffersonian thought. To say it should have done this or that is pointless and ignores the historical context of the time and ignores the benefit of hindsight we have today. Rightists who insist on an all-or-nothing form of revolution are again indirectly supporting the status quo, even if only because their solution is impossible. We American nationalists looked back on the genuine mistakes of those leaders whose line we supported, and we analyzed them and tried to think of how we could avoid them, and we wanted the help of the American masses in this endeavor. At the same time, we understood that we couldn't predict the future beyond the fact that the ruling continent would respond to us with fury and brimstone. And while we had a historical foundation for the future struggle, we would inevitably become face to face with extremely difficult situations. As for other patriot or nationalist parties which did not fit into the above-mentioned categories, our relationship with them depended on their view towards us, and in most cases, we would try to carry on civil debate and discussion with them. All experience and knowledge gained by the people's movement has some value. Who could join? How would I get involved? Every ethnic American who was sick of being abused by globalism was open to our plan for change and agreed with our platform and program was welcome to join. I recommend that you subscribe to my channel to get an in-depth look at the party. I will be uploading a series of videos talking about our ideological thought.